it, and it's where it's, you know, you'll see a security checkpoint and you'll have a 5-kilometer backup trying to get through a security checkpoint. Unacceptable. You know, it doesn't have to be that way. It honestly doesn't. And that's the effort that we make and the challenge that we bring and the solutions we provide to work with both on the governmental side, with our governmental partners, and say, it doesn't have, you know, a checkpoint doesn't have to be a 5-mile backup that is, you know, takes a person 3 hours to get through. It doesn't have to be that way. You can do it fast, you can do it efficiently, you can do it safely, and you don't have to inconvenience people. You don't have to be intrusive. You know, there are, you know, it's interesting, and I go back to some of the checkpoints of the past, one of which you kind of described. Well, you have the vehicle pull up, they're opening doors, and they're getting out. And I call that antiquated, or it's almost like the dinosaurs. It's soon to go away because it's just not necessary. You don't gain the additional information you need. In fact, it's causes more of a risk. The longer the line you have at the checkpoint, the more people standing around with guns and opening cars, the more a risk everybody is in that whole area. So you don't want those things. You know, you don't want that giant line there. You want people to get in fast, efficiently, but to be able to screen them and make sure it's safe. So those are some of the challenges, and I think that you'll see in the future, you know, security costs will go down. There'll be dramatic improvements that can be deployed worldwide, not just in Afghanistan and in trouble spots, that'll benefit the rest of the world. I think we'll learn tremendous lessons and be able to take some of those lessons learned and apply those throughout the world. You know, if for example, if you look now and you look at what's happening in the airline industry, right? You know, the knee-jerk reaction to the individual that tried to light, you know, the explosives on the flight.
The shoe bomb.
Exactly. Right. You look at that and that knee-jerk reaction, and you ask yourself, well, you know, are we now implementing things that actually do make us make it safer, or is it just inconvenience? And that's a difficult question. It's a difficult challenge. And there's pros and cons to both, and there's different arguments. I'm an advocate for using technology appropriately and minimizing inconvenience.
Well, I remember many years ago I went through an airport and through security, and there was a new technology that was sort of brought through. They had my briefcase, and they just took a little cloth disc and, and they put it in the machine and said, "Okay, go." I'm like, "What's this? What's happening?" So that technology has been around for a while now. How have things, you know, so that was the first sort of, like, you know, hyper technology that I saw at an airport. Well, how have things progressed now in this industry for things like, okay, for when there was the handheld unit, what other things, what's sort of out there now for protecting us from these explosive things?
It had, and that's a good point that you noticed that. I mean, that's a classic example of how the industry has changed, right? That technology you referred to has been, you know, 15, 20 years old, right? It was designed for to detect explosive particles on, you know, the handle of a suitcase, or on bags, or on the trunk of a car, or the steering wheel of a car, etc. And then to analyze that, right? Which takes time, right? You take it out, they have to analyze it, come back out, they have to read it and interpret what they see, and then make a decision whether that car can go by. You know, it takes 2 minutes, right, to do that one aspect of it. And you look at that today, and that particular concept has evolved. It now can detect far more trace elements than it could before. It's faster, a little more efficient. But yet it goes back to the same point I made earlier, and we just discussed, and that's that it still requires an individual to walk up and be next to the item, right? And provide some risk to that person in doing it, and everyone around them, right? And I look at that and you say, well, that's antiquated technology. You know, that's not the technology of the future. And it doesn't matter that it can detect more particles now. And maybe a year from now it can detect another 20 or 30 that it can't do today, and it can do it a few seconds faster. So it's once again moving away from technology that requires you to be physically present. And I would always say, you know, technology that moves away from requiring you, the passenger, to present yourself for screening and all of your items, and for people to go through those. Thus, if you were to do harm, you're putting everybody in harm's way, the person who's screening you. Moving away from that technology to technology that says, before you even get to the checkpoint, before you get even close, we're going to know whether you have anything and you're a risk, or whether you require a secondary inspection. And that's really how you can effectively address some of the concerns, particularly in Afghanistan, particularly in airports around the world today. We ought to be spending time on people, bags, boxes, packages, all these things that we have a suspicion there's an issue with. Not with you or I, who we packed our bags correctly. We're trying to go through. We're trying to get through in an expeditious manner, and we're not a risk. Now they don't know that, but the technology from a distance can single that out and say, you know what, you can go through the normal stuff, and you're going to go through this pretty expeditiously. But you know what, we have a 50% probability that there's a trace element of C4 or petin on that person that's behind you. That person's going to go through and get a secondary inspection, and they should. And I would think that all of us, flying on the plane would appreciate that level of extra attention. But at the same time, should we inconvenience you because we can't quite get this right, and we have to wait for you to physically come up and go through this screening process? That's the dynamic change that's happening within the security industry, and that's kind of what we're advocating and sharing with our Afghan partners, with our partners in Pakistan and Iraq, who have gone from no technology to thinking, well, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be the little wand that I swipe here and take over and takes 2 or 3 minutes to analyze and inconvenience everybody, and I may not get all the information I want anyway. So it's a dynamic change, and we're excited about that.
That sounds really fascinating. I know some aspects of the security industry from my previous career back in Canada, because I was in certain things that I did. And after the show, I'll tell you about it. But I think that actually what we'll do is we'll take a short break right now, and then we'll come back to the Crossroads. Don't go away. See you in a moment. Take care.
Change. This time we're coming to you from ABC News London. 6 News Editor-in-Chief Sarkhan Oral brings you the latest developments from London. ABC News veteran news editor and correspondent Jim Shudo answers Sarkhan Oral's questions. We go behind the scenes of the Afghanistan conference held in London, the United States' new Afghanistan strategy, and the latest developments in Afghanistan from the streets of Kabul, England's role in the Iraq War, along with analysis of statements made by Tony Blair, the policies of change of Conservative Party leader David Cameron, who is expected to become the country's next leader following the elections this May. You'll get the answers to these questions and more from the ABC News London studios on Change with Sarkhan Oral.
يغطي برنامج وجهة نظر أهم الأحداث على شاشة 6 نيوز من خلال استضافة ضيوف مختصين كل في مجاله. انظروا إلى العالم من خلال هذه النافذة أيضا، نافذة وجهة نظر في قناة 6 نيوز.
And now we have a special Vox Pop today in flavor with Afghanistan. And I have Peter here. Peter, welcome to the Crossroads.